So, welcome everyone. I'm so glad everyone's here. I hope everybody is really energetic tonight and raring to go and to hear the talk on Radvocacy in action, federal and state campaigns. We're going to hear some great talks. And today is a new moment in history for the State Society that we're marking. It is the inaugural RJR Fund webinar. And for those of you that have not heard about this, RJR stands for Robert J. Rapoport, who happens to be on this call tonight. And this whole series was the series of webinars is being funded by Dr. Rapoport, who is a good friend of mine, a good friend of the society, and a phenomenal advocate for radiology. Dr. Rapoport is a former president of our New York State Radiological Society. He's been a longtime member of the board of radiology in New York and a foundation board member. He's also been the chair of our state's governmental affairs committee. And he has really just led us to a point where in the state, radiology is very well respected by our legislators. We have meetings with them on an ongoing basis. Under his leadership, we also started having meetings with our health commissioner. So really leading the way for us to be effective advocates in New York. And Dr. Rapoport has donated to our foundation and given us a grant that has enabled us to finance the webinars and seminars that are being presented this year in 2025-2026 season. So welcome to the inaugural webinar. And thank you, Dr. Rapoport. If everyone could give Dr. Rapoport a round of applause for his leadership and his vision here. And I see it's exploding rounds of applause, so that's great. So now we're gonna go on to our main topic today, which again, Radvocacy in action, federal and state campaigns, and we have two national leaders that are here to talk to us today. As I said, the chat is active here, so if you have questions, thoughts, comments, please put them in the chat because this should be an interactive seminar where we can all learn from each other and learn from our questions. And so, don't be shy. Please use the chat. But remember, we are on our code of conduct, and we just need to make sure that we're all being respectful of everyone's thoughts and everybody's comments. So now I'm just going to go on to introduce our two speakers for this evening. Again, they are both nationally known figures in the world of advocacy. We have Ashley Walton here, and she is the Governmental Affairs Director for our American College of Radiology. She holds a BA in political science from the University of Kansas and a JD from Ohio Northern University. And she's had 15 years of lobbying and healthcare policy experience. And she's going to highlight our ongoing advocacy efforts and show us how they've been tailored to radiology trainees and the impact they've had on our profession. We also have Dr. Amy Patel here, who is a fellow board certified radiologist who specializes in breast imaging. Yay, breast imagers. I saw looking through, we've got a number of breast imagers that are on this conference, and so yay to that. Dr. Patel has served as the past president of the American Association of Women in Radiology, and she really has an interest in driving mentorship, social media, and has served as the associate editor of digital media for the Journal of the American College of Radiology. Uh, Dr. Patel has had done many things and is extremely active. And so it's no wonder that she has received two 40 Under 40 awards, well deserved. Currently, though, she is sharing as the chair of the American College of Radiology's Radiology Advocacy Network and also the chair of RADPAC. So those of you that have been at the ACR meeting have seen her and have seen her in action, cheering us along to raise money for RADPAC and also to make people aware of the RAN and to get involved. So I would like to welcome both of them to New York and to our Zoom here. And I thank you for your time and for your talk and for educating us on radiology and advocacy.
Thank you, Bonnie. Okay for me to kick it off then?
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you for inviting me and having me this evening. I work in our ACR DC office, so interacting mostly on the federal level with Congress and the administration, but I am going to talk a little bit about our state efforts as well. So, brief agenda, kind of the key issues I'm going to hit tonight. You'll see here are one big, beautiful. So this was the bill passed by Congress via the reconciliation process, which is a speeded up process in which they pass a large scale bill aimed at reducing government spending. And the president signed it into law in July, and it included provisions on the Medicare fee schedule. Just for the calendar year 2026, we did see a small bump of 2.5%. And then that's actually really a good thing because usually reconciliation does not involve any new spending. And then no relief for 2025, but the medical community does continue to work on long-term reform. So some of the key provisions in the One Big Beautiful Bill, of course, there were significant changes to Medicaid, work requirements and cost sharing. There was a freeze on the provider tax rates, some of the exemptions for nursing homes and intermediate care facilities, and then really a lot of these key provisions were directed at the state directed payments and a new cap of 100% on Medicare rates. So something that's kind of prevalent throughout the One Big Beautiful Bill is a lot of these provisions do not go into effect until after the next election. And so I would say that was done quite purposefully so that, maybe some of the more controversial provisions do not impact the upcoming elections. So looking back at Medicare physician payment, again, the proposed rule was released this summer for the calendar year 2026. We are what we like to say in rulemaking season. It's usually in the summer all the way kind of into late fall. There is a proposed increase to the conversion factor included. So again, very positive. But then there were a lot of kind of new provisions directed at changes through which are policies that the AMA usually spearheads. So, for example, the CMS is proposing not to move forward with the PPIS data, which is the survey that AMA just finished conducting, which is how they collect practice data and update indirect practice expense information. There was an overall kind of distrust of physician data included in the proposed fee schedule rule. But back to the positive conversion factor, it was a 2.5 cent, or excuse me, I'm sorry. Another provision that CMS is proposing that is new is a 2.5% efficiency adjustment to work RVUs of procedure-based codes. So this is across the board and really something we haven't seen before. And then they also are proposing to reduce facility-based PE, that's practice expense, redistributing to non-facility practice expense. So all kinds of things in there. This will be finalized later this year. So again, this is just the proposed rule. So one of our key legislative efforts that the ACR has been really working on for years, there was legislation passed in 2014 known as the Protecting Access to Medicare Act, that's PAMA. And this created an appropriate use implementation program through legislation, which should have been enacted by 2017. It would require providers to consult appropriate use criteria through the CDSM, which should be embedded via the electronic health medical record. So a lot of facilities in anticipation of the implementation of this law did implement AUC. So many hospital administrations do have this program already. But on the implementation side, CMS has had challenges. So ACR is proposing new legislation that would address a lot of the administrative challenges that CMS is encountering. One of the key things that CMS has told us is that they do see cost savings. This is always a really big deal in Congress because we like to see legislation that saves money. Also, the legislative fix to the old legislation would basically take away a real-time claim processing requirement and replace that with a audit process, which the new proposed legislation is called the ROOT Act, or the Radiology Outpatient Ordering Transmissions Act. It's a mouthful, which is why we call it the ROOT Act. It's been introduced in the Senate. It's S 1692 by Senators Blackburn and Cortez Masto, so bipartisan legislation. It's been referred to the Senate Finance Committee, and we've had a couple new co-sponsors added over the last couple months. But we are working on getting additional co-sponsors, and that's a key effort that me and my colleagues have been doing throughout the August recess, is meeting with our members of Congress and also working on trying to get a House companion bill introduced, which Representative Harshbarger from Tennessee on the Energy and Commerce Committee, which has jurisdiction over this bill, has agreed to co-sponsor with her colleague, Representative Moore. But we are looking for a Democratic counterpart. And so the idea is to have key legislation with representatives from all of the key committees in the House and Senate, so bipartisan, bicameral, and have this go through regular order, which is really just how you get committee to take up a bill and then get that bill to move to the floor. So this is an ongoing effort. So some of the key provisions that I think I acknowledged earlier really do include taking away the challenge that CMS indicated related to the real-time claims processing data, which is how they were going to ensure that providers had consulted the AUC. Instead, it replaces it with an audit. It removes any penalties that radiologists would have received for missing AUC info, which is really just a no-brainer because we have no control over what the ordering physician does. And it does work in some exclusions for participants of clinical trial and small and rural practices. Another key initiative that we are hearing, I would say number one from our membership, is workforce. We're hearing about just the increase in workload for radiologists as well as a shortage of radiologists due to multiple factors. I think the Medicare population is increasing, more tests are being done. And I think that goes back to the PAMA legislation and our new ROOT Act into why it's so necessary to help address some of that workload. With implementing AUC, we might see, the right test the first time, hopefully helping with that workload. And then right now it's a supply and demand issue. We're only training so many physicians through the graduate medical education program due to the cap that's in place that Congress placed back in the 90s, and really have only seen small incremental increases to the graduate medical education program. So the workforce issue, we see it both as like a short and long-term strategy in terms of getting new GME slots, but also making sure AUC is implemented to address some of the workload issues. And then another pathway is utilizing some of the visa programs that enable international medical students to work in the U.S. after being trained through U.S. residency. One other long going issue that dates back to prior to 2020, when really legislation was seen on this issue, is the No Surprises Act and the various regulations to implement the law. This was long negotiated in Congress between the House and Senate, with lots of stakeholder input, including the ACR, to really ensure patients are kept from receiving surprise medical bills and then implementing an independent dispute resolution process for physicians and insurers to resolve the disputes. So we've seen key legislation introduced for the second year in a row to address some of the issues with NSA implementation, specifically related to payment. A common complaint we've heard from physicians and not just radiologists is that even after going through the IDR process and prevailing, physicians are not being paid by insurance companies. So the No Surprises Enforcement Act is legislation that would really put a penalty in place for when there are non-payment. The original No Surprises Act bill said it has to be within 30 days, and we're seeing that, broken several times, and then sometimes just months later, still no payment. So this would require the penalty if it's not, paid within 30 days after the IDR has been resolved. Last I'll mention there's been ongoing court challenges related to the initial NSA legislation, um, mostly based on the regulations and how the agencies have interpreted what Congress intended in that legislation. So Congress has said, it should be done a certain way, and the agencies have taken a lot of liberties with how they've issued the rules regarding the IDR process. There have been challenges related to the IDR admin fee, the batching issues, which is how, you're allowed to batch certain claims together when you're submitting an IDR. Also the qualifying payment and how heavily it is weighed for the arbitration entities and whether or not they weigh that over other factors in the IDR process. So the medical community has been led by the Texas Medical Association in those court challenges, and ACR has joined with other groups as a friend of the court in those lawsuits, supporting them. And we have largely prevailed. We are still in the middle of a appeal related to the QPA, and that case was heard, I think, 3 days ago. So that was on appeal, and we will probably hear within the next few months how that one pans out. The ongoing appropriations process is underway. We've seen, I think, within the first few months of the new administration, a lot of policies related to the NIH and the overall Department of Health and Human Services. So right now, NIH is operating under a continuing resolution for the current fiscal year. So the NIH Research Committee each year comes together requesting a certain funding level. It's around 51 billion for FY 2026. That would be an increase from the last fiscal year funding level. A lot of the recent White House actions that have impacted the funding for NIH were through executive orders, such as the facilities and administrative cuts that were announced, and then the across the board cut to HHS and each of the institutes under the NIH. And then more recently, the president's budget that was released at the end of February requested a 40% reduction in funding. So these are all proposals. Congress has to go through its appropriations process, and that's how NIH is actually funded. So while we've seen the administrative actions, Congress will make the ultimate decision. Some slightly more in the weeds issues on the regulatory side, again, related to some of the executive orders that the administration has released. One related to the to the NIOSH B reader issue. This is a surveillance program implemented by CDC through NIOSH, specifically related to coal miners and other workers that require lung screening. This was completely paused, and several staff within CDC that ran the program were also part of the reduction in force. ACR advocated to ensure that this program continued, and it was unpaused after May of 2025. Similarly, in the VA, we've seen the National Teleradiology Program impacted by administrative actions. There was the broad return to work effort that was issued at the beginning of the new Congress and the new administration. And we would have seen a lot of problems through the National Teleradiology Program because a lot of the readers for that program are not based in VA facilities. They are actually all over the country reading for multiple facilities. And again, we worked with members of Congress to contact the Secretary of the VA and ensure that there were exceptions in place for radiologists. So a little bit of a glimpse at what we're going to see coming down the pipeline. A lot of carryover work from Biden era rules. So like I said, we're in the middle of rule season, so we're going to see more things coming out. Certainly a lot of focus on AI. I think the current Congress is very interested, as well as the administration. And then we just saw the release of the AI action plan. So that's kind of going to be a footprint that maybe the Congress will consult as it works and moves forward to implement new policies through legislation specifically related to AI. And I do want to be cognizant of the time so my colleague can talk. So I might speed up a little bit. Just to give a little overview on our legislative update from the state side of things, we have a scope of practice fund. So for the New York Society or any other society that is struggling with scope issues in the state, we do have a fund to assist with those efforts. Some recent wins have been in Oklahoma and Wisconsin. A highlight, there have been over 90 bills on scope non-physician personnel and over 70 bills on breast health. So we've seen a lot of scope of practice bills over the last state legislative sessions. And then those on issues are related to prior auth and gold carding. I mean, prior auth is a big issue at the federal level as well, but we've seen a lot of action in the states. And then again, AI, it's a theme everywhere. I know the big key question that we are all asking, and even Congress is asking, is what role should the feds play versus the states? And a lot of states are already getting ahead on this issue. So I think there's going to be some friction related to AI and that interaction over the next year and a half or so. And then just to highlight, we did have a great Hill Day last May. We had key issues we're focusing on, payment reform, specifically related to an inflationary update and exploring a budget neutrality bill. I think those are issues that are going to continue. We are at a crucial point with Congress right now where they are working to fund the government. That current continuing regulation or resolution, excuse me, funds the government through the end of September. So we have just a few days left in the month to figure out what those issues will be. And physician payment has been explored as something that may go in the funding bill. We've seen in past years that they want what they call a clean CR, so that may or may not actually happen. But I just want to acknowledge that, some of the key issues we advocated for on our Hill Day might be taken up in the CR that's being addressed, in the coming days. And then again, a key focus was the amended PAMA AUC legislation with the ROOT Act. So great Hill Day. And then I'm going to turn it over. I think we're keeping questions at the end, but if there's anything I can answer now, I'm happy to do that. I haven't been able to glance at the chat box. Otherwise, I will turn it over to.
We have some questions in the chat box,
Okay.
but we can address them. We can give Amy a chance to talk and then address those afterward. That's fine.
Perfect.
Okay, well, thank you, Ashley, for sharing all that awesome information. I don't know how your team does it with how rapidly things are changing, and we really appreciate all of your hard work because I know that you guys are working around the clock. So thank you for that. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit now to and not spend a lot of time because we obviously want to have some time for Q&A and be respectful of everyone's evening. First of all, thank you so much for having us. We feel very honored to be the inaugural speakers for this very amazing and generous lectureship. So now I'm going to shift gears to how to get involved. So Ashley really shared, what's going on at the state and federal level, and how can you be a part of our efforts because we certainly need your help. Next slide. These are my disclosures. Next slide. So I have three questions for you today. What does advocacy mean for radiology and our patients? Why is advocacy crucial for patient care and access? And then how can you get involved at the local, state, and national level? And I'll be focusing more on state and national today in particular. Next slide. Thank you. So basically, from in terms of key terms, the most important term I feel like, on here is the word, obviously, advocate. We are trying to advocate for access to care to our patients, to be fairly reimbursed for the services we provide. And lobbying comes hand in hand with advocating. Back, I would say even a decade or 2 decades ago, the word lobbying sort of had a negative connotation when it came to the field of medicine. We're known as a very noble profession, but truly we need to integrate lobbying in our vernacular because lobbying is very crucial for access to care for our patients. And then policies, of course, are principle of action adopted or proposed by government, party, business, or individual. Next slide. So why should you get involved? Like as the old adage says, if you aren't at the table, you're on the menu. And I can't stress this enough. We need all to get involved, regardless of practice type or subspecialty. I think historically, if you talk to one faction or another, maybe one faction like private practice historically has been more involved, and the academics may say we don't need to be involved or vice versa, but really we all need to be involved because these issues are affecting all practice types. So getting involved early is really important and builds momentum for future involvement. Next slide. So the earlier, the better you get involved in advocacy endeavors. It's just truly invaluable. And I feel that, and I'm preaching to the choir. You all are very engaged. You're here tonight. Obviously, you're very active advocates. But I always tell trainees in particular, if you can learn about getting involved and actually then get involved earlier, it's just going to be so crucial when you're a practicing radiologist and you're not playing the catch-up game. Because, as we all know, this kind of content, this part of our jobs, a part of radiology, is equally just important as our clinical day-to-day, and arguably is getting even more important in these, just these last few years. Healthcare has become increasingly competitive. So the earlier one can get really acquainted with the issues, learn how to advocate, and get involved, the better. Next slide. So if you zone out from any or all of this talk, I want you to remember this slide. So 94% of Congress has no healthcare background. So that means 94% of members of Congress are making decisions on behalf of us, our practices, our institutions, our patients. So that's why it's really important to develop formidable relationships with our members of Congress so that we can educate them effectively and appropriately on the issues so that they vote pro radiology legislation. Next slide. So how can you get involved? Next slide. So at the local level, and I know that some of you have participated in these and we are very, very appreciative, or site visits. They're just a really great way to show and engage elected officials what we do, the integral role we play in patient care, and can be extremely effective to drive policy change, making these relationships, building those relationships, and then putting together legislation. Next slide. Joining your state radiological society. Obviously, you all are a part of it, and I have your, I don't know if that's the current emblem, but that's what I have. There's the New York State Radiological Society, and getting involved in your state radiology advocacy network. As we all know, many advocacy issues are state specific. Our chair of our state GR arm, as many of you know, is Dr. Bonnie Litvak. She does an incredible job leading us at the state level. And we know that state issues just continue to become more and more apparent. That's why we created that Scope of Practice Fund, because we know scope is just creeping more and more for states. So getting involved at the state level is extremely important. And we try to say getting involved at the national level obviously is the goal, but the state level is equally important. Next slide. So I had talked about, site visits can be really a great way to engage your elected officials. And I was really fortunate to have a few site visits in the last few years. And from that, I developed a relationship with this senator, former senator in this purple jacket, Senator Lauren Arthur. And together, we were able to work on above average risk breast imaging legislation, which passed in 2020. And that there's us testifying a week before the COVID shutdown. So really, and we've been fortunate to pass three critical pieces of breast imaging legislation in Missouri in 2018, 2020, and 2023. And really it boiled down to developing these relationships with these elected officials early and working together to drive policy change. And it's important to remember that oftentimes these elected officials that run at the state level and win, they oftentimes go on to run at the federal level. And so if we can build those relationships at the state level and when they're sort of quote unquote starting out, it can be truly immensely beneficial when or if they get to the federal level, because they're going to know that you remembered them and you were an advocate for them when they were very early on in their career, which can really bode us well in a lot of situations when it comes to federal radiology legislation. Next slide. So getting involved in the ACR, obviously, many of you are very, very vociferously involved and we're very appreciative. And advocacy, as you know, is one of our key pillars to the college. Next slide. So advocacy is one of the fundamental missions or key pillars of the college, representing the interests of radiologists and their patients to Congress, state legislatures, and regulatory agencies, really trying to educate radiologists in training, and then supporting the grassroots participation. So particularly Ashley talked about Capitol Hill Day briefly in one of the previous slides. Next slide. So again, I just keep preaching, meeting with elected officials, start early. So many of you know about the Rutherford Levanti Fellowship in Government Relations. And this is a great 1-week fellowship where we have trainees come to DC, spend time with our ACR government relations team, and really learn about the legislative and regulatory processes, both at the state and federal level. This is me when I was a young resident in my senior year, and I just had a really amazing experience. And I believe, New York has sent Rutherford Fellows for the fellowship. So I really would encourage you to continue to send trainees for this fellowship. It's a 1-week program, and the contact for that would be Ted Burns. And it truly was a week for me that really solidified sort of where I saw my clinical career and trajectory going. And it really opened my eyes to a whole new, aspect of what we do as radiologists and how we can deliver patient care effectively by being a true advocate. Next slide. So Ashley talked about Hill Day. This year we had over 450 radiologists meet with over 200 offices. So we know that New York brings a large contingency and we're very appreciative, but it's just such an incredible day and way to get involved if you haven't before. And those of you who haven't, we hope that you will join us in the years to come. Next slide. Attending the ACR meeting, of course, and or the RADPAC Gala. We try to have the RADPAC Gala particularly on the Tuesday night of ACR, and these are just images of a lot of trainees. Now, most of these trainees are attendings, but it's just a really great way, and again, stresses the importance of getting involved early. Next slide. So the Radiology Advocacy Network is comprised of over 200 trainees and radiologists that represent their training program or state. And we have a state RAN leader, and they're the point person, and they are to work with the radiology or the RAN reps of each residency program. So we should have a trainee RAN rep leader representing each residency program. And also, we're developing a YPS RAN. So your state should also have a YPS leader. And so we want all of these leaders to work in concert together so that we can have that sort of pipeline creation, because we know that pipeline creation is really important to the Radvocacy movement. And it's just a really crucial, and I have here the RAN for tackling federal policy issues, but as many of you know now, we are helping to tackle state policy issues as well. We're able to send out calls to action as well at the state level, in addition to the federal, as we have been for many years. Next slide. Next slide. So RAN 3.0 was sort of something that came to light once I became chair of both of the RAN and RADPAC in 2022. So this is the first time we've ever had a all-encompassing grassroots advocacy chair, where I was kind of like the experiment, I guess. And with that, we developed RAN 3.0. So with the RAN 3.0 model, we have a RAN board, and there's actually a couple in the meeting tonight that are on our board, Dr. Litvack and Dr. Alex Podlasky. So really appreciative for all of their efforts because they work incredibly hard, very, very appreciative. Like I said, we're working on the YPS RAN. We've now recently established a pre-radiology RAN, which is comprised of medical students and interns that may not have matched into radiology, but are striving to, or maybe are switching from another specialty into radiology. And we truly feel that pipeline creation is crucial. For example, a great model specialty are the anesthesiologists. They're doing really, really well, and definitely well when it comes to PAC dollars raised. And we're like, what's the secret sauce? And they get their trainees, they get their learners very early. They educate them very early on the issues, and it bodes for them very well. So we are, having this incredible movement that we're seeing, and it really came to be because we had so many medical students and interns reaching out saying, what can we do to get involved? And so the pre-radiology RAN truly came to fruition. We've also upped our communication all year round. We have a Radvocacy newsletter that comes out quarterly that has both RAN and RADPAC content. We have also a separate RADPAC newsletter that we're resurrecting currently. We have government relations webinars, we have X chats, and then in-person meetings. We also are continuously working on to refine our new website. If you go to www.radiologyadvocacy.org, please check it out. And if there's something that you think we could improve upon, let us know, because we're in the process of refining it right now. Next slide. So this is sort of the interface. If you go to that website, you can either click on RAN or RADPAC. And if you go to RAN, this sort of pops up, and then you have all of these, become an advocate, action alerts, all these tabs at the top that you can click on. Next slide. And then there's a map as well that you can toggle over, and that's a work in progress. We're really working on if you can toggle over a state, you can see how many calls to action that those radiologists in that particular state responded to that year. So we're trying to sort of map that out so different states can see how engaged each other are, and hopefully up the ante in that regard. Next slide. So RAN leaders are asked to communicate information regarding our calls to action, any webinars, any content, any digital events happening, in-person events, and RADPAC events and campaigns. Next slide. So many of you know that RADPAC is our nonpartisan multi-candidate political action committee of the ACRA, and it truly focuses on the political influence of radiology in Washington, D.C. And our success rate when we do support those who are pro-radiology, it continues to be over 90%. So we've had a really good success rate in supporting or betting on those who are going to win, and then, of course, advocate for our patients and our profession. Next slide. So I just briefly wanted to share the difference between hard money and soft money because I get this question a lot when it comes to RADPAC and contributions. So a hard money contribution would be a contribution that you make, an individual radiologist trainee from a personal bank account. And those contributions can be used to directly support pro radiology candidates. A soft money contribution is made by a group from a corporate account, and that those funds can only be used for travel funds, for example, for the various events that our GR team attends. So there are very strict regulations with the FEC, and so these are and we have to report them accordingly as well. Next slide. So this is just showing you where we are with the other specialty packs. As you can see, the anesthesiologists truly are just doing a superlative job. Unfortunately, we have now dropped to number 7, and we used to be at between 1 and 2. So we're really working hard to increase our standing. And a lot of the reason why our standing has come down is because, just as many of you know, the rapid changes happening to our profession, the era of consolidations and mergers, dissolving of practices, and historically the majority of those who are giving to the PAC were in private practice. So we're really working on now targeted campaigns for academic institutions, for hospital employed physicians. So we're really flipping the switch now with our strategy, reaching out to potential contributors. Next slide. So again, this just emphasizes the work that's ahead of us. We know it's going to be an uphill climb, but we really feel like we have now started to put together a really great strategy to reach out to all radiologists. Next slide. One of the reasons, too, that our PAC dollars have decreased is just the number of additional PACs in radiology that have come to light in the last few years. So we know that US Radiology and our radiology partners have their own PACs. Astro has their own PAC, SIR. But what you will see here is that RADPAC resoundingly has the most impact dollars compared to these other PACs, and therefore we truly are the #1 political action committee voice on Capitol Hill when it comes to radiology. Next slide. So we know, many of you know about our campaigns that we have, and we've been kind of experimenting with different campaigns. March Chapter Challenge or March Radness. We know New York is very active in that campaign, and we're really appreciative. So I will just go to the next slide. I know you all are very familiar with those. And these are some of our winners in previous years. Social media, I know for better or for worse, still relevant and important. You can find us on X at these handles. RAN is now on Blue Sky. RADPAC is on LinkedIn. We're trying to post as many activities and things as possible that we're doing. One thing that we're doing in the month of October, if any of you are interested, is we are teaming up with women members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, and we're going to have a hashtag Mammography Monday where they're going to be sharing. We have a group of members of Congress that are going to be sharing important facts about early detection and the importance of screening. And so if you see any of those posts, those are basically a toolkit that we designed for them. Please feel free to amplify and share and just show our support and solidarity. So they'll be posting on X, they're going to be posting on LinkedIn, they're going to be posting on Blue Sky, Instagram. So please look out for those. And if you see those are coming from the American College of Radiology. Next slide. Again, I talked about we have our Radvocacy newsletter, our RADPAC newsletter that's particularly sent to contributors with more granular content, the Advocacy in Action e-news that comes out every Saturday morning. It should be in your inbox. If you're not receiving those, let us know. And then our Radvocacy webinars that we continue to have all year round. Next slide. We are also putting together this really robust advocacy curriculum. It's for trainees in particular, but really anybody could benefit. And this is in collaboration between the ACR Commission for Publications and Lifelong Learning and our ACR Government Relations team. So here is the link. It's still very much a work in progress, but it's really been amazing to see the content that we've been sharing, and we're continuing to build with so many volunteers that we're very appreciative of. And Dr. Podlasky is actually one of our pillar leaders, and he's actually recorded some content, so we're very appreciative to him. But if any of you want to get involved in our efforts to create this content, please let us know, because we are looking for volunteers. Next slide. Radvocacy podcast hosted by RADPAC and Ted Burns. It's on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Great information, bite-sized information, great for your morning commute. Check us out. Next slide. So in conclusion, advocacy represents our commitment to the future of our profession, which you control. And like Dr. Silva says, and many of you guys know Zeke, he says, make advocacy automatic. And, like I said, the healthcare environment right now is very, very competitive. So it's really going to be up to us to blaze this advocacy trail and really the future of our trainees. And there are diverse opportunities to get involved at the local, state, and national level, like I showed you today. And we just really need advocates of all types, all career levels, all practice types to ensure the future success of medicine. So I really hope that you are energized from this. I know that, at times it can feel very discouraging, particularly in right now in today's climate. But, we have to continue to forge on. And so I really implore you to try to do that. And we'd really, really love to have you involved in our advocacy efforts. And with that, I thank you so much. And this is my contact information if by chance you'd like to reach out to me with anything. Thank you.
Thank you both. Those were really great, fabulous talks. We are going to open it up for questions. So if you have a question and you would like to just raise your hand, that's great. While you're thinking about your questions and things that you'd like to ask these two great resources, while we're doing that, let's just go back to the chat and we'll try to ask some questions that have come up while the lectures were going on. So one of them, the first question was, we had talked about our workforce and our workforce issues, and some of the answers to our workforce issues are within our foreign grads. And so with the changes that are coming up with the new H-1B visa and when that goes into effect, how do we think that's going to affect our radiology workforce, our radiology training force, and what do we think that the college needs to do to advocate for us?
So that is still kind of playing out. I will say that there have been early talks that some of the exemptions will apply to physicians. So I think our advocacy strategy is to get clarity on whether or not some of the exceptions will be allowed for physicians. We know that the financial burden is huge. We don't think that's going to be beneficial for practices. Anyone trying to employ people on these visas. I think it's a current $5,000 fee going up to $100,000. Definitely not sustainable. So there are comment opportunities that ACR is involved in through the regulatory process. And again, we're working to get clarity on whether or not the exemptions will apply to physicians and others in, different professions as well. So unclear, but we're working on it.
Great, great. It's on the list. So that's great.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. There was another question in our chat also about Medicare coverage for secondary breast screening, which is not happening, particularly screening breast ultrasounds. And that's an issue, particularly in New York, where that is a tool that's widely used. And now some women are opting out of that because they can't afford to do that. And we passed some laws in New York, as has Amy in her state, to try to get around that on New York plans, but the majority of the plans are ERISA plans. And then we also have Medicare and Medicaid recipients that really are affected on a national level. So the question is, what is the ACR doing about this? And I guess this is probably a good time to talk about the Find It Early Act and where we are with that. What else can we be doing or could the ACR be doing?
You definitely mentioned the Find It Early Act. I believe it's been introduced in the House, not yet in the Senate. This is something we've typically supported. They changed the language this year. So we don't oppose the bill, but we have some concerns about some of the new language. So I think in working with members of Congress, we would like to see them revert back to the old version of that bill. And that's something, our breast commission has weighed in on and has gone, through ACR leadership about, this is definitely something that we've long supported and, we want to see coverage. And then I would defer to Amy if she has anything to add.
Yeah, I mean, we have to be realistic. This bill's not passing this year. I mean, I don't I just want to rip the Band-Aid off. So we're facing the same crap in Missouri, to be quite honest. It's so incredibly frustrating. So, we've passed these pieces of legislation, but as anybody knows, and definitely you, Bonnie, knows that, sometimes you'll write legislation and it isn't always implemented the way you intended it for it to be implemented. So we're like, for example, we're having issues where we passed this high risk breast imaging legislation in 2020, and there's still insurance carriers that are finding loopholes to deny coverage and that kind of thing. So what we're doing is taking it at the state level. So we're working on right now with Senator McCrary in Missouri and her legislative assistant to basically, we're doing an analysis of where are we seeing most denials and for what pieces of legislation. And she recently met with the Department of I'm like blanking on it now, but she just met with the Department of Social Security and Health and Senior Services to talk about where the gaps are. She's met with the Missouri Insurance Department. So we're really trying to get granular. And as many of you know, there's so many contracts and per state for Medicare in particular. I mean, there's so many, and so it can be very, very there can be a lot of variability. So I would just implore you to try to, at this point, try to join forces with maybe any elected official at the state level that has an interest in pushing this forward. We've already made some great progress with Senator McCreary because she's been just so just very forceful with meeting with all the factions, because basically we, like, for example, we saw an insurance carrier that continuing to deny certain exams. And so she talked to the Missouri Insurance Department. The Missouri Insurance Department actually contacted that insurance carrier. So we are trying to really get granular about it to try to ensure patients have access. But it is incredibly infuriating because even today, my one of our navigators came into the reading room and said, I've got a patient on the phone. She's really upset because her MRI for high risk screening was covered last year, and now her insurance carrier is saying it's not covered this year, and it's the same insurance carrier. So we're still dealing with those challenges as well.
Thank you, Amy. I don't see any more questions in the chat. I don't know if anybody would like to raise their hand if they have and ask a question. I'm looking in here to see, but I don't see any hands that are raised. Maybe what I would just like to do one thing before we go, and because again, we want to be respectful of everybody's time. But if there's one pearl that you can leave us with, what maybe would each of you have as be that one pearl? We can have Ashley, if you want to go first, or Amy.
There's always going to be another election. I think I've seen, the tide change again and again. So even when it feels like a lot of policies are maybe unraveling, some of the great things that you all do or things that, the ACR has supported. I'd say give it a year and a half or two and, the tide can change again. So that's my optimism.
Love optimism.
Yeah, I definitely echo Ashley's sentiments. And, I think that it's important for us to look at the big picture. Why did we go into medicine in the first place? And I think most of us went into medicine because we wanted to make a difference. And I think advocacy is such an effective way to make a difference. All of us who do this kind of work, we know it's hard, it's oftentimes thankless, it includes a lot of hours, oftentimes a lot of unpaid hours, but it's important, right? Because if we are so fortunate to be in a position where we can advocate and push for change, and our patients rely on us for that. So every day I walk in thinking that, I am here for a reason to advocate for our patients and for access to care. And if we aren't the voices for those patients, who will be? So I hope that, even in this, like I said, at times discouraging climate, that we try to stay positive. And like Ashley said, things can definitely change in a short period of time. So we have to just think about the long game.
Great. Thank you both so much for joining us on our inaugural meeting here, and for sharing your thoughts and insights. It really was, I learned a lot, and I'm sure everybody on the call learned a lot, and those that will be viewing this in the future will learn a lot. And thank you both for all that you're doing on behalf of radiologists, radiology, and our patients. It is something that's invaluable, as is our ACR. So thank you both, and thank you for joining us. Thank you again to Rob Rapoport for sponsoring this lecture series. And thank you for Ben for organizing us, and for really staying fluid and being able to go with the flow here, particularly tonight. They're really phenomenal, everyone. Thanks again.